In May 2012, I invited Shin and Shizuka to participate in this exhibition series. The exhibitions are a result of a design by research commissioned by the Flemish Architecture Institute and deSingel, dealing with the role of architects in urgent challenges in society and where architecture can make a difference. We commissioned Shizuka and Shin to design a first aid minimum house, a contemporary private shelter for the after tsunami condition. I was interested to know how they would combine Japanese building tradition, technological possibilities, and the actual needs of people. This concrete question was a starting point of a dialogue between Shizuka, Shin, Christoph, and I about their professional and personal engagement as an architect in the reconstruction of a living environment after the disaster. And this process became a penetrating process for Shizuka and Shin, and me keeping on asking them again and again to exteriorize what this event and the consequences of it were doing with them and their practice. Now, I didn't know in the beginning, but YURIAGE, the town we were working on, is a town where Shizuka has a very close relationship with. Her family is still living there. And the parents of Shizuka were working on the reconstruction projects immediately after the tsunami. They are both local architects, and they worked as volunteers and asked Shin and Shizuka regularly for help and feedback. Now, after 1.5 years, visits to YURIAGE, interviews with inhabitants, professionals in all kinds of specialism, a debate in RIBA in London and in Pulsar in Brussels, all these discussions led to a kind of other solution, namely that we agreed to propose several projects and programs for the reconstruction of the city. And I will explain these projects are site-specific and dealing with the real needs of the people. A memorial place on the mountain, a cafe, a social meeting point, a mobile market infrastructure for festivities and market, and a seaside tribune with open-air accommodations. Now, the project is perhaps an alternative to what is happening, and it could be also interpreted as a critique on how Japanese government is proceeding for the reconstruction. While we are doing the project, while we are working on this, huge concrete walls are being taken up 7 meter high to 40 meter wide in front of the sea. There is no consultation of local population at all, and their knowledge and dedication to the area and their trauma is completely ignored. And anyway, we hope that this project that started as a dream could turn into a kind of reality, can nourish ideas, and can be a kind of spiritual support to the community to recover a little bit from what happened. I would like to present shortly Shin and Shizuka. They have an office, an architecture practice in Brussels. They operate in Europe and Japan. They are working on the scale of architecture and scenography. And we could say that the drive in their architecture is to create space that gives comfort, pleasure, a quietness and a calm that speaks to all the senses. And we could also say that they try to consign Asian and European knowledge, tradition and sensibilities in their architectural projects. Now I would like to give them the floor and to present the projects in about 10 minutes, let's say.
Thank you for giving us the commission from BAI. Without your support, this very difficult project. We cannot complete it. So I'd like to start shortly about situation now in YURIAGE. On the 11th March 2011, Northeast Japan was hit by a huge-scale earthquake and tsunami. BBC's Damian Gramatica reported at that time, YURIAGE, one of Natri's coastal towns, once a pleasant fishing port, has been wiped from the map. What has been happening in the 2 years since the tsunami? What evidence is there of any progress being made? That was our question. Since the 17th century, YURIAGE has been a beautiful seaside town with a thriving fishing industry established by shogunate family from Sendai City. It is an important heritage site and a part of Japan's long history. One day of the tsunami, emergency siren system did not work, and within 40 minutes, 800 out of 4,000 people at home in the town at that time lost their lives. Controversy has been raised between the local government, whose plan to build a 72-meter high embankment for the construction of new housing, and the local residents, 2/3 of whom would prefer to relocate the town in a more secure area. Meanwhile, since the tsunami, the cultural activities in YURIAGE have kept going, thanks to YURIAGE Machi Cafe, a voluntary center, and others. For instance, each summer, the Bon Festival has gathered around 50,000 visitors for the firework displays like this, next to the sea, and the YURIAGE morning market attract between 5,000 and 10,000 people each Sunday. With strong family connection to the area and as young architects living outside Japan, we have been participating in a variety of volunteer events both in Belgium and Japan. Thanks to local volunteers, we are able to be part of several cultural social workshops at YURIAGE Machi Cafe, the local community center. We met people who, unsure of the future, were struggling with their lives. Yet they were smiling and confronting their daily problem with optimism and a wish to be strong for the future generation. These experiences, while shocking, were also encouraging and made us think seriously about the role of the architect in the long-term recovery of this hugely damaged area. Since 2011, we have taken an active part in YURIAGE Renaissance project, which was designed and proposed by local architect Shoichi Haryu and JIA Miyagi together with local victims. The project was presented to the city mayor in summer 2012. Instead of emptying the town, the project proposed that its market activity should be maintained by means of environmentally friendly solution. This would involve first of all the construction of wind turbines and porous fish nest under the wind turbine, which would soften the impact of tsunami hitting the ground. Secondly, the construction of a series of raised concrete islands, which would slow down the advance of wave and so protect people's lives. Finally, a number of emergency parking towers, which in an emergency would provide immediate shelter as a safe haven and evacuation point for the use of rescue service. We also organized, as Catherine said, for the international symposium. So she explained that, I skip.
In May 2012, Catherine van der Marlier invited us to participate in the exhibition series Young Thinkers, Makers, Dreamers, The exhibitions are the result of design by research commissioned by the curator, dealing with the role of architects in urgent challenges in society and where architects can make a difference. The proposed commission was to design minimum shelter and to think about this could coincide with a more sustainable reconstruction for the area of Northeast Japan and in particular in YURIAGE. And although houses and homes are the first priority of the victims, we struggled with this commission and started a discussion with Catherine and Christophe Graf, director of VAI, on the scale, concept and impact of our intervention, our research, dream and possible project. Catherine supported us in engaging ourselves in the volunteer activities in YURIAGE to get a grip on an insight into the real support we could offer as young architects. Through this ongoing dialogue, we have to confront the challenge posed by the power of nature in those areas. At one point, we thought that it was almost impossible to propose anything in such a dangerous location. They questioned us about the local people are dealing with the present situation and how they are approaching the future after the tsunami. From those questions, we started thinking about the present situation in relation to Japanese traditional culture rather than local politics. Japan has many mixed religions, Buddhism, Shintoism, Christianity, and others exist side by side. Rather than religion, Shintoism is a set of values founded in daily life, which are rooted in Japan's climate and geography. It is a practical view of the world rooted in respect for nature and the environment. It is because of this belief in nature and related festivals, which are still honored, that we decided to include both aspects of the town, mountain and sea, so as to remain sympathetic to the spirituality and poetry of the landscape. Finally, in spring 2013, in consideration of the physical and psychological needs expressed by local people in our interviews and research, we decided a series of small architecture and scenographic projects to provide cultural facilities and memorial space. We proposed invisible needs, a positive contribution to local life, encouraging cultural activities and giving a broader picture in a period of uncertainty. We hope to have provided a 4-stage sustainable solution which nourishes the growth with the community and meets the social, physical, and cultural and spiritual needs.
So the first proposal is YURIAGE Match Cafe, new facility for the community center. Actually, JIA and volunteer recuperated and restored the community center already. So this will replace the existing volunteer center because it's still damaged quite a lot of this architecture, which is popular with both local victims and visitors. It has been a gathering space for people who lost their homes in order to keep in contact with their relatives and neighbors and friends, of course. In accordance with the local needs, we propose the following facility. For example, people lost a lot of their jobs, so internet facility, job-seeking facility, and workshop space for cooking and craft work, conference space and cafe for relaxation. In addition, we propose a contemporary no theater because there was a story from local victim. He lost a family and he's an artist and he can make no mask. So he made a no mask dedication to his family. So many local people, they start making their own performances and so on, based on their traditional culture and performative form. So this is our project plan. The house is quite small as Japanese scale, and also We wanted to provide open space so that people can gather for performances and also daily life with just cafe facilities and so on. This would be a cozy and welcoming place to be with each other and share daily news. So that's the... Sorry, it's difficult to do. So Seaside Festival scenography, this is a scenography intervention, so it's temporary setting. And one of the setting we propose is next to Hiyori Hill. This is before tsunami, this is after. And Hiyori Hill was a symbol for fishermen who wants to come back to land. Then the Hiyori Hill was a symbol to come back to the land. So the facility is food court stall and benches and storage and toilet because there's so many visitors on this Hiyori Hill. And cultural festivals have long been known for the capacity of revitalized area damaged by wars or natural disaster. In a way, this town is famous for its fish industry, and Yuriage Morning Market is very famous too. We propose a mobile scenography to form an ensemble yatai, and traditional Japanese food stall, next to the Hiyori Sacred Hill. The alternative configuration for this mobile scenography can provide also stage setting for Bon dance, like this, and for Bon Festival. Bon Festival is a Japanese religious tradition welcoming ancestor spirits. Other different configuration could be formed using these units. This mobile and adjustable scenography could be rented out to other tsunami damaged areas that were in need of these facilities. This project would be a relaxing place for regular entertainment, and we hope it would contribute to the revitalization of tsunami-hit areas.
A few blocks next to the food market. So on the image, we can see the food market was more or less on this corner. So very close to the food market. The maritime area stretches along the coast of the inland sea. From there, the existing Hiroura Bridge extends to a peninsula that used to offer recreational activities such as cycle tracks, swimming pool, and beaches, attracting walkers and surfers. Every summer, the Bon Festival fireworks still light up the sky above the sea. The tribune is connected to the Hiroura Bridge and an emergency parking tower which ensures safety in case of emergency. So we didn't explain so graphically in the exhibition, but this is actually the emergency parking tower that the local architects in Japan developed in another project called the YURIAGE Renaissance Project. And we keep this idea by saying that in case of emergency, people can still evacuate in there. So that's why we can develop social and cultural activities still on the coastal line. The challenge here is to incorporate a tribune at the junction of these industrial and recreational areas, and it is forming a kind of a roof. And under the roof and next to the tribune, there will be a series of offices, restaurants, cafes, and emergency office. So it's the block which is behind the tribune, which has all these functions. And the three curved and sloping surfaces providing seating areas and walkway to the area underneath. The volume of the lift stands behind the tribune, giving easy access to the upper level, and the extended shaft which serve as a technical tower for public events. By the time we have developed the 3 projects in YURIAGE, we realized there was a need to make a further connection with the surrounding landscape, especially since the near future it is possible that local victims might be relocated close to the mountainside. Kumanonachi Shrine is located on Tateyama Mountain behind the city. The god of the shrine protects people from the sea. Once in a while during sacred events, this god is descended by locals in a portable shrine from the mountain to YURIAGE town. From deep in the mountain, there is a view over the whole town extending to the horizon of the Pacific Ocean beyond. Our intention is to complete the promenade around the shrine, restoring existing paths and adding wooden construction along the route to focus on the visual and spiritual connection between the land and the sea. At one point, the promenade will open to a clearing where one can rest and contemplate the landscape from several pavilions linked by a long deck. At the foot of the main shrine, a horizontal bridge progressively offers a view of the landscape from above the trees. This project would serve as a living memorial for the present and the future generation. We end here with some local images, and we finish with the beautiful YURIAGE pictures that we still have in our memory. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I didn't finish yet my introduction, sorry. We have 2 persons invited for the debate. First person is Rudy Luiters. He's an artist and one of the members of Atelier Veldwerk, together with Onno Dirker. Since 2003, they work in Holland and Belgium for diverse projects that deal with the design of public space. Inventory, analyze, and present the reality in new context and with new connections is typical for their approach. Luiters' domain of research ranges from historical landscape via rural architecture to the urban environment. Their art manifests itself as a cultural analysis, sometimes as an intervention, but it can also be publication, a sound or a visual work, a photo series, texts, or spatial installations. Or it can be a combination of all these media. Veldwerk and Rudy Luiters are currently working for large-scale architectural projects and landscape projects as the one with the team of Cousset and Goris for the Nature Centers Win in Knokke, and the Oversteek, the bridge in Nijmegen, a project by Laurent Ney and partners. We invited also Professor Willy van der Walle. He's a Belgian academic, author, Japanologist and sinologist, and connected to the Catholic University of Leuven. He teaches Japanese languages and literature, history of Japan, art history of East Asia, and history of China and Chinese poetry as well. He's a very honored person by the Japanese government, and was conferred the Order of the Rising Sun Gold Race with neck ribbon. He publishes regularly on cultural and historical issues of these countries, China and Japan. And recently he published Een geschiedenis van Japan, van samurai tot soft power, with Akko Publishers, which is a report on the transformation of Japan into a modern state. Christophe Grafe, the director of the Vlaams Architectuurinstituut, will put or start the debate and manage the debate.
I'll try to. I have to say that thinking about this evening made me feel a little uneasy. Obviously, Katrina and I have been working with the architects for quite a bit on this project. And it is one of those projects where you start on something with a series of preconceptions, and they are almost continuously being challenged, or certainly not necessarily satisfied, which is of course interesting, but makes it quite difficult to sort of see how you tackle this. And one of the problems is, of course, how do you actually deal with this situation in Japan, which is both enormous, larger than life, but which also touches on a series of difficulties which are to do with the reception of Japan in European eyes. The fact that we have our own Japans in our heads, that Japan has been continuously appropriated by Europeans over the last, let's say, century and a half. So in other words, what kind of country are we actually dealing with as Europeans? Because we also see the reflections of Japan in our own culture all the time. Now, I have to say that one of the images today was very, very direct for me. And of course, directness is one of the things that is both treacherous and one way of approaching a design. And that was, it reminded me of a journey which I undertook about 6 years ago or 7 years ago, taking a train from Berlin to the Polish border and across the Oder, where there's a small town now called Kustrin, former Kustrin, a town which is famous because it was there that there was a big Prussian fortress, and in that fortress, Frederick II, or the Great, was forced by his father to see his boyfriend being hanged. This town was completely wiped out in the Second World War. All you see is a plan. You see a plan not actually as a plan. You know, what you see is remnants, it's not even ruins. And I did feel somehow reminded of the extreme power of that experience, of seeing a city that is no longer there, but because it is no longer there, is all the more present, that I felt might be a key for my own reaction to this project. In a way, it is about things that are no longer there, things that will never be there again, but also about people who somehow want to live in this area. If I asked our guests, participants today, I would very much like your first reactions to these projects. And perhaps it might be, for you, the same might be true, that there's one image that somehow carries a very particular part of the significance of this project. Can I start with, let's start with the artist, who's probably used to this method.
Yes. Is the microphone working? Does it work? Okay. I was struck by the story about the image, the image in my mind of the siren not working, and that's the reason, the actual reason why so many people got killed. Normally, the siren should have been working, and people could have fled, but people were relying on the siren, and it didn't work. In the same, probably next to where the siren was, is a small hill, an artificial hill, raised in the 19th century, and on this hill is a stone, a memorial stone, and this stone warns people for a tsunami, and that if there is an earthquake, they have 40 minutes to fly from the wave. So apparently this this oral cultural tradition of warning. We have this beautiful German word, Mahnmal. It's a Mahnmal. The Mahnmal is somewhere between a reminder and a warning monument, a memorial, a warning memorial. So apparently, a changing society, people rely on government and on sirens, on electronic devices or electric devices, and forgetting about the cultural warnings in the same surrounding. So what I like very much, I have this somewhat ambiguous relation to architects in general. Some of them say even fuck the context. Well, here we have a couple of architects who are working as anthropologists or sociologists, taking in consideration cultural heritage, rituals and landscape. So I consider their work, in this case, the work for this region in Japan, as a monument as such, as a Mahnmal, as a reminding, a warning memorial.
So we've got the monument that actually has a sort of, makes a connection to layers in culture and the experience of landscape that are overlayered, that are actually sort of eliminated by technocratic belief. Is that something that you can relate to, or are there other things which actually for you are more important about this project?
I think it's a microcosmic, it strikes me as a microcosmic enterprise, because of course the earthquake, the tsunami as a phenomenon, is a perennial one in Japan. Ever since the beginning of recorded history, Japan has experienced over 600 major earthquakes, that is with considerable damage. Of course, the archipelago experiences tremors every day, but these are minute ones, but the big ones, over 600. So this is something quite perennial. And of course, it usually is, the big ones are on a very large scale. So with this project, we zoom in on a very small, specific, particular area, which is a small fishing town. That is first. That's I think the first thing that strikes me. Of course, a second thing, since you referred to this German town, is a point of simultaneity. Actually, when I heard that the tsunami happened on the 11th of March 2 years ago, I happened to be in the Villa Medici in Rome. So the contrast between something that is, I think, an epitome of beauty on the one hand, where I was, at the same time, people's lives were being destroyed in a dramatic way. And among those people, the people of YURIAGE, when I, come to think of it, with hindsight, it's very striking, and it's basically an emotional thing. But I think a third thing, to stay on a macrocosmic scale, this town, when I looked at the photographs, I was struck by the fact that it's so low-lying and so nudging towards the coastline. And this makes me think of, as a historian, that in prehistoric times, actually most of Japan's population was living on heights and hills, and most of archaeological findings are made on higher places. So throughout history, Japanese population, especially when it came into the agricultural phase, was gradually coming down from the hills and settling on the coastal plains, which of course meant exposing itself to the dangers of tsunami. So all these things, I think, somehow come together in seeing these photographs. But apart from that, on the microcosmic scale, what is the most important thing is the question how the people are going to get back to their lives. To what extent are they're going to be able to recover. First of all, the whole project, I think, addresses the non-material aspects, or at least the less material aspects of life. They are predicated, I think, on a preliminary phase where you have an infrastructural recovery and reconstruction, which in a sense is, of course, unavoidable. But by proposing the way they have proposed the project, they somehow, I think, you know, change or influence or determine or predetermine the way that the infrastructural reconstruction has to be done. Now, I have heard a few rather unnerving elements in the story, that is that the Japanese government is taking things into their hands on a very technocratic and you know, big scale, and thereby ignoring the needs of the people of small communities like the one in YURIAGE, and somehow maybe making impossible the project that is being proposed here. So the project as a proposal necessarily and immediately you know, calls into question major political choices and policies that have been or are being formulated as we speak.
I would like to ask Rudy whether you agree, because I understand that you think that there's a precondition, which is actually, you know, the larger, as it were, technocratic reconstruction taking a lead, and then this could be following.
Well, I don't know whether they're taking a lead, but I think you can't do without it.
Yeah, first.
Yeah, and also you can't do without it. I mean, the cultural needs of the population have to be addressed, but there will have to be more than that.
Would you agree with that?
No, of course not. It's both as important. I don't think the one can exist without the other. Maybe for robots it could be the case.
I think we agree then.
Well, I mean, please don't. But
unfortunately, we agree.
No, I thinking about this relying on technology and the political issue. I agree. Of course, it's you address immediately a political issue if you do this this bottom-up project in a country where bottom-up projects are not so hoe zeg je dat? Common. That's the word. Not so common. Centralized, very strong government. Whereas if I stay to the idea of the monument, if you look in Europe, in Belgium and Holland especially, you will find an amazing amount of monuments made by or based on local initiatives. And I'm talking on physical objects, monuments, but also in the more conceptual sense, you would find an enormous amount of monuments not commissioned by the state. And if you make this difference between the state monuments and the bottom-up monuments, you will see that the bottom-up monuments always work, and the commissioned monuments work sometimes.
But then we are not talking bottom-up monuments here. We are talking architects.
I'm talking about they are making a monument.
Yeah, okay, but do you think that would qualify for bottom-up or top-down monument?
Bottom-up. They try to grasp the. They interviewed people. They were sociologists. They do a lot of research and making inventories.
Is that true? I mean, of course, I know you've done all these interviews, but would you agree that your monuments are bottom-up monuments? Were you thinking of those? I mean, personally, I think a bottom-up monument is something much more innocent than what we're talking here.
Oh, I consider that project as a monument. It's not about making a bottom up. The way they do it, it's a parallel project. The government is making decisions and propositions, and the local population is not agreeing on it, and they offer an alternative.
Is that
it can be
correct?
used? Maybe it can be used.
Is it as clear cut as Rudy says?
Well, as I understand it.
Perhaps one of you can.
Actually, as a whole project, as a package of whole project, perhaps we can say our project is come from really bottom up as your explanation. But each function of the element of proposal, if you look at it, it's actually quite functional also. And according to the demand I and Shin, we were both found from over there, and quite realistic too. So each project might not be memorial or monumental, but as a whole concept of this proposition can be a little bit political, maybe the power of we are not famous at all, to do this process also a bottom up maybe. That's my opinion.
In some way, also, when we were discussing during all the process, and somehow the fact that we didn't research really precisely in a political or economical way, by the fact that the projects are more dealing with a close analyze of nature and philosophy, by abstracting the project actually, because it's not taking into account all the parameters, it is somehow it can be quite provocative maybe, because we wanted to think only about something and not about everything. But I think this allowed us to think back about what is politics, for example, and what is economy. By the fact that we were neglecting them, we were not thinking about that. We did the project, and when we come back as a global image and we think about how this project can live in with taking account with politics or economics, then maybe it's this image can be discussed, I think, quite a lot. But like Shizuka said, basically we have kind of quiet and respectful approach about what the Japanese people would like to think and feel. And in this way, we think we did something functional, like Shizuka said. Mm-hmm. It's,
yeah, well, I'm feeling reminded of some of the parts of the reconstruction effort after the Second World War. It is also quite striking that, for example, in Germany, one of the first type of building that was actually rebuilt after 1945 in many towns was the theatre, even before housing was built. It's surprisingly early. And the idea was, of course, that you had to rebuild society in the wake of the greatest moral catastrophe. And that couldn't be done only by building housing, although the housing was actually more urgent in, if you look at the, necessity. Mm-hmm. Was there such a sort of understanding also in your project? Or is that something that perhaps dawned on you while working on the project?
Yes, very much so. Actually, while government is still discussing with local people where their new house going to be, they already start making the event where they used to hold at YURIAGE town, like fireworks and big festival or bon dancing, And as Christoph said, I participated some of the cultural event as a volunteer, also as one of the citizens, and then we thought that's really necessary right now, and they're kind of in consideration to choose what kind of location they are going to live for a long time. But for the cultural activity, it's kind of seasonal in Japan. Each summer, each winter, so they already want to have these facilities. Is that the answer?
I want to go back to the experts, as it were.
Well, first of all, I would like to question what Luc says about the monument, because I don't think the people want to be a monument. They want to get back to their lives. So, and what the project is about is not so much as, I think, making a monument as to strike a balance between the needs of modern life and traditional patterns of social and community life. Because obviously this was, as you can see on the first photograph, this was a densely populated town. People had populated it over the years, and so it was really crowded, and people all wanted to have cars or had cars, and they wanted to have roads and so on. So the amenities of modern life. Now, I think the big question is, where can they strike a balance between this? This is something that's pushing forward all the time, everywhere. It's universal. If you have one car, we need a second one, and so on. So we need, if you have a house with 4 rooms, next time we need one with 6 rooms. So this, let's say, modernity in a sense, this is of course not wiped out. It's still living in the minds of the people, and they all want a better level of life and a better, material life. But obviously there are quite a few drawbacks, and I think the project is, in a sense, well, it is a reminder in the sense that you shouldn't commit too much to this modernity at the cost of anything else. And I think their proposal has the wisdom that by striking a balance between, not living as fast as modern life, finding a way in between, because we can never go back to the past, but striking a balance and somehow finding this equilibrium. This would involve not growing too fast, obviously, otherwise the town would be overpopulated again. So you need different areas, some of them where population is concentrated, some of them where there is seasonal activity, where some of them, in other words, areas that have a vague status. They're not really popular, they're not really claimed, but they're not unclaimed either. And then you have the sea and the mountain. So in between, actually, Shin mentioned the 4 notions, traditional notions of Japanese topographical distribution. The mountain, where people are not living, because that's the wild area where animals live, where you go hunting and so on. Then you have the place, the village, so to speak, then the heath, or the uncultivated area, but sometimes you can use it, and then you have the sea. So this is a very balanced notion of space, but it is somewhat, it's a notion that has to be kept, because if you let people go and if you let economy grow, then the heath is going to disappear. So I think basically it's the question of how will we organize our lives in the future. Is it a life that is predicated on ever unlimited growth and modernization and more amenities, or are we going to strike a balance with more traditional ways that are less growth oriented?
Well, you gave us a bit of a sort of history of Japanese culture, and let's say the specific Japanese history of modernization, which I understand is in fact to do, living in the lowlands is where modern man has started to live, because up to a certain degree, a certain point, that was unknown. To some degree, the natural catastrophe is also a catastrophe of modern civilization.
And demography.
The number of people. And the question is, of course, would it be possible, would it be desirable even to sort of take all that back? Are we all going to be living in the hills again and sort of be very, very economical? What we get is a landscape. Basically, it's a landscape of signs and places. Places for rituals.
Some of them, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some of them. Places which only have the potential to work in those moments when there's actually not a flood. For example, there's a sense that not everything, not all the previously inhabited landscape is going to be built over again. We're only going to have these isolated, signs. Is that part of such an understanding that no, we can't go back? Perhaps.
If I may intervene, it's not so much a matter of going back or stopping the machine, but the machine will run. I don't think we have a misunderstanding about that. But the thing is, we can concrete the landscape and we can asphalt the landscape, but there is this layer, this important layer, this cultural layer. You can never dissolve. You even if you put concrete on it, it will be there, it will be felt. You make people unhappy maybe if you put concrete on it. So this is the whole point. We need to have it's a small notion of a counterbalance, but you have this massive machine running over the landscape. But we need projects like this to...
Yeah, but I mean, sorry, to interrupt, but I mean, what you're saying makes me feel like these little monuments are the tiny signs that actually make the concrete landscape cozy.
It's not tiny. We don't have time, but I would love to explain the monument of Jochen Goetz in Osnabrück. Probably you know it or not. It's a huge square. It's invisible, but it's the most important war monument of Germany, and it's called Platz des unsichtbaren Mahnmals. It's a square with 1,600 stones with the names of Jewish cemeteries who have disappeared, and they are all the names are upside down, so you don't see them. It's incredible. You walk on eggs. It's invisible. It's not tiny. It makes culture very visible and feelable.
I kind of sympathize with this because I think memory, landscape, collective ritual are all very, very important. I'm just slightly nervous, and perhaps you can sort of also touch into come into this. That there's a fine line between that being made important and perhaps the much more explosive potential of a project like this, which is really about, are we actually going to redevelop this strip of 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers along the coast in the same way that we have since, let's say, the 19th century? Or perhaps we should inhabit the world in a completely different way. I mean, what I'm slightly nervous about is that monument, der Denkmalkult, can also be an excuse for not actually actually taking the consequences.
Sure.
Is that something that you want to come into? I mean, how do you see your own project in this? Do you see? I mean, it's explosive in many ways, obviously, because it is intuitive. It's defying the idea that this needs a rational response. It may be completely against what the authorities have in mind vis-à-vis the reconstruction. But there are two aspects of this. Either it is, you know, a small, beautiful, poetic reminder of something that was there while the, you know, process of modernization can be rolled out over the whole landscape surrounding it, or is it actually something else?
I think the way we
Sorry.
I think, you know, they want to make it's about life. It's not about monument. They want, I think, you know, preserve some vital, if not all-encompassing, some vital elements of traditional community life. So a monument is something that refers to the past, but that's not what they're thinking about. I don't think they even think about monument, but about traditional ways, some traditional elements, some traditional veins in modern life, so that there is, and of course they refer to the fact that this traditional life also had some wisdom that tended to be neglected or ignored by overconfidence in technocratic solutions. I think.
There's one issue you mentioned also in the discussion, and it was the notion of gathering. So while we proposed to have an individual house, you were not accepting because you felt the need that people wanted to gather. And in that way, we came to the discussion that gathering means being together and having the feeling of not being alone with your drama, and entering into a kind of ritual of culture and theater. And in that way, we slipped very slowly to the idea that maybe cultural infrastructure that is gathering people could be a solution, could be a need, which was not expressed immediately by the people, but as life was going on, they expressed that the gathering was important, and then slightly dysfunctional ideas were put around it. And I think that was one thing, the notion of gathering, and then it was more like how we felt about in Europe, landscape and monuments were remembering some things because of the dramas we had in this part of Europe. We suggested, or we at least felt also, that nature is important, and there is a natural, there is a connection with nature in Japanese life and tradition, that maybe to come to terms with the territory could suggest to come to a kind of project which has to deal with land. And I think it's in a very organic way. It was not in a statement way, or it was in a very gentle way in looking and searching, and they going back each time and sense, is people feeling that? Are people talking about that? That we grasped this maybe very small and invisible things. Yeah.
It is very appealing that when you talk about life, or when you talk about gathering idea, or about culture, that it's about the pleasure to live, about how to feel that it is worth living there. And we are not in Europe, we are in YURIAGE. And I don't think, if I was a fisherman and I knew that in maybe 50 years there will be a tsunami, I would still love to live 5 meters from the sea. And I would hope, let's say in 50 years, that the siren would work, or within 50 years I will not forget what's happened 2 years ago, so I can of course evacuate.
But of course that requires, in a way, a fundamental acceptance of fragility.
Yes, it's a pleasure to feel how fragile we are, and in what fragile environment we are living, and it's constantly changing. unlike the embankment, which wants to stay there forever. And personally, I accept that it can be destroyed. Our architecture could be destroyed in 2 years. I would not regret, because it would fulfill for those 2 years some joyful memories, or there would be something, I hope, that people could feel with it. Maybe it's too ambitious to say that, but
for me, I wouldn't agree 2 years. It's very short, even Japanese architecture. No. I think the opinion from the participant really interesting for me to think about Japan from outside, but also it's a very difficult project because we are very young architect, and also Japan, there are many famous architects, established architects. I don't think they knew this answer yet, because this tsunami is each 1,000 years scale. And scale 7 and 9, the highest tsunami was 30 meter, and this area was 8 meter, relatively low compared to the highest. So for me, the question 3 points, like Christoph also said, like after the war, okay, the city was destroyed, town was wiped away, nothing, empty. There, how to relate again with that land? Because 300 years there was a connection with that land. And as a professor said, we actually didn't want to make memorize or memorial, because in the photograph show that stone, it said, after the big earthquake, please evacuate within 40 minutes. But that stone didn't work for us, our generation. So it was from beginning of 19th century, 20? And it didn't pass the message to us. So that the stone, memorial stone, didn't work. No. So we didn't want to make memorial architecture or memorial sculpture. And then we found that more how the local people are living right now, handling right now of difficult time. They're making a lot of events. Maybe within the event there is something to pass, the message of the danger, a message of also like a pressure, and the event is actually revitalizing than architecture itself. So architecture is kind of following how they're making events. And also the last point is how to learn from this catastrophe event for the next generation. And there would be a discussion with tradition and modernization and all together. And our proposition is quite maybe naive in a way, but the research we made is quite organic, as Katrin said.
Yeah, I think the importance is in the fact that it reveals, and what it reveals is that with an architectural research or with a sensibility of architects working as anthropologists, you see that there are marks left by people, be it monuments, be it religious, be it oral history, but people did not rely on technocratic. People did not rely, in former times, did not rely on government. They relied on themselves and their own power, and that was grandmothers telling the children, don't go too near to the sea. That was people making engravements, making stones. That were rituals of bringing every 33 years, you suggested, shrines down to the town, because there was a kind of, it's a kind of immaterial knowledge that is going over from one generation to another generation. And for me, this is the striking thing, that by working with architects, by working with architecture, by working with a kind of material goal, you see that if you do it thoroughly and sensible, there are other aspects that it reveals, and for me that is the value of it, and maybe the small incentive you can give to a government or to a local community.
Yeah, not necessarily. I almost regret to bring up to put up the notion of the monument. I clearly said I consider it as a monument.
It has
in
the
my
same
case,
impact.
because it's apart from it's not a minor detail. To me, it's such an important aspect of what architecture should be based on, and that's what I want to stress.
I mean, the question is, of course, if memory is actually embodied, not so much in buildings, but actually in rituals, in activities and practices. What exactly is the role of an architectural design in there? I mean, we're also at a moment of reflection. I mean, having done all this, do you feel you've gone too far or not even far enough? If that is a objective, you know, I think, which is a valid objective, then, you know. Because in one case, let's just say the circle is almost an architecture. No. Yeah. In another instance, you've actually built something that could be seen as a sort of traditional Japanese building. Where do you draw the line? How much is necessary, and when does it actually become too much?
I think when we see the research, both the landscape and how this area got damaged, and then we found out design approach, like you said. For example, Machi Cafe, we didn't want to build something high or something really different from original community center. And we had discussed quite a lot because of the security issue. And we decided to stick with a Japanese housing scale and then to think about the emergency tower nearby, because otherwise the village gonna be high-rise concrete buildings. The other one, scenography, it's really scenography intervention. It's mobile, it's not fixed, so it's demonstrate the situation. And for mountain, we are very careful. We didn't want to destroy anything from forest. So our bridge is
then the project, which is technologically also most ambitious, because we had that conversation. What is it made of? And you said, well, it's a new material.
Oh, C Tribune is I mean, the one we challenge for the design, new design could be. It's true. That's the only one we have sought the different archetype. Actually, it's true. No.
Yeah, but it's at the same time, paradoxically, the intervention that is in the most, as it were, working, rough environment. It's for fishermen. Yeah. It's next to the harbour, which is a working harbour even after the tsunami. I mean, were you looking for that paradox, or is it? Why is it exactly there that you make the most precious of the buildings?
I don't know if the Seaside Tribune is so different from the other process of thinking that we had. Maybe it's different because we wanted to satisfy a bigger number of people.
It's the scale.
And next to the scale, it's true that it is in the junction of recreational and industrial, different kind of zones are mixing there. And we would love, of course, to make this building, and we would love especially to see how the fishermen, but also local people, but also the visitors, the travelers and the musicians, all these kind of people can use this thin platform, let's say, either to be under or either above. But it is a very simple idea, I think, which is not ambitious as you might think.
I never trust the design of architecture. This is not ambitious, especially as I know a thing or two about spans. But anyway,
he used a lot of words, but he didn't say building.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, but that is when you have to be really, really nervous. Time is pressing on. There are two questions which I think we need to address. I am going to the Japanologist with a question which I think nobody of us can really answer except you, perhaps. At least we might expect you to. Which is, this is a project which, as we discuss it and as it reveals itself, is a fundamental critique of the approaches, the predominant approaches to this catastrophe, also in Japan, we understand, because no, they're certainly not going to build these, they're going to build an 8 meter or 10 meter or 15 meter sea defense. So we've got a project that is completely against that logic. Do you think that a project like this is effective? Could it have an effect in a society like Japan, which, after all, has gone through this difficulty? And secondly, is also, we understand, in a moment of deep insecurity to do with, you know, this catastrophe, economics, demographics, you know, being rather defensive.
Well, whether it's going to be effective or not, I don't know. I'm not that optimistic, but it's a statement we need to make, even if at the outset we fear that our voice is not going to be heard. I think this is a kind of statement that needs to be made. But that's
a very Lutheran European statement.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid, yes. You said that.
Ich kann nicht anders. I don't think that wasn't the question.
I think, you know, I probably am a supporter or an advocate of Albert Camus' L'homme révolté. You know, even if you think that you can't make it, you still have to make the statement. So I think it's one that has to be made. But of course, we're facing a huge counterpart or a huge adversary, if you want. That's the, let's say, the government, the Japanese government, and also the local government, who want to make something quite different. Actually, the tsunami has made tabula rasa. It's almost as if we have terra nullius. There's something there to be taken, to be occupied, and so they are ready to move in and make something that would respond or at least comply with all kind of rational considerations and modern technocratic requirements, and also put to the greatest possible use all modern technocratic achievements. And you know, I think it's also wrong to describe this in very well, Manichaean terms. You know, we're the goodies, or the local population are the goodies, and the government is the Moloch who moves in. Because, of course, the population, the Japanese population, also requires or expects its government to make sure that it can live in security and so on. So it's a very ambiguous attitude. The Japanese population, for instance, with relation to Fukushima, only very few people were critical of the very existence of this 55 or 54 nuclear power station. So there's also this, you know, this massive, probably amorphous and not very well articulated expectation of the population that the government will take things in hands, and that this represents rational control over nature and it wants risks to be reduced as much as possible, because that's also a very strong need of all modern populations. Also in Belgium, we don't want to take any risks. Risks have to be avoided at all costs, and that of course involves a lot of sacrificing. But that's also very strong in Japan. So as a kind of subculture, you find everywhere in small areas, people getting together and trying to formulate something subcultural that goes in against the mainstream. But it usually is the weakest of the two, and it often loses. The best thing that we can hope is that at least part of it, some of it, bits of what it has to offer are incorporated and somehow mitigate the onslaught of modern technocratic restructuring of the environment. Yeah, I think that's what I think about this. And so this project is one of hopefully many more, that somehow can, bring about an undercurrent that in the end probably may have a very beneficial effect. Also, I want to stress that no project is innocent, of course, because the tsunami has now created in a sort of tabula rasa. There is nothing, so it has to be refilled. But of course, we have to be first to occupy and appropriate the area, the space. Think, for instance, about the mountain. This is a mountainous area, uninhabited traditionally. There is a Shinto shrine on top of it. So in their project, they could have left it alone, but they haven't. They have given it meaning in a modern sense, because the really traditional sense would have been, we're not talking about the mountain, we just leave it alone. But that would have been, then it would not have had any meaning for modern man. Now they have incorporated, they have designed paths, they have designed bridges to look in, to walk on and to look onto the sea. So it has still, although not very intensely and certainly not in a destructive way, but it has been incorporated into this small town, whereas traditionally it isn't, because mountain is something that's not part of human habitation. So even alternatives actually, make a step forward to more integration of the environment in human environment. So it's a further humanization of the environment. Even the alternatives do that. It's something to consider.
So in a way, the instrument.
But by doing this, they avert worse. Yeah. Because if they don't do it, then the bulldozers will move in and just
you
clear.
have to poke a hole.
Right.
I mean,
so
it's
you have to.
Big, but you have to poke a hole.
You have to preempt worse scenarios.
Yeah. So we are talking about it's being effective there, but let's also say this is a project which is in the grand tradition of exoticisms. In other words, us as Europeans, and even if you are not Europeans by birth, you are to some degree, of course, also infected by living here. It is in that tradition of us looking there. What, if anything, might be the effect on debates here? Katrien, you're the curator.
I think I tackled the point already, because for me it's a kind of personal interest also to see what is architects doing in emergency case happenings, and then you see that the logic of infrastructure and the logic of big scale is intervening immediately. But to me it was a kind of challenge to see if another culture than a European culture would intervene in a different way. And by giving this commission, I hoped to discover that. If there is something universal in cultures, or if it's conditioned by European architecture history and by Japanese architecture history. So what can it? I think that the global we are, and as global, more global the world is coming, there is connection to place, there is connection to tradition, there is connection to people, and these two things are going on together, and to me it's striking that architecture is one of the professions that is revealing this. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, I'm optimistic. I won't say I'm very happy, but I'm optimistic.
And I was actually amazed by this project, that I've seen these images of the tsunami, and I've buried them in my mind. They're somewhere, and I never thought of rebuilding the country. Of course, it's not my country, but actually I should have done, because it's going to happen to us. Whether it's a tsunami or a flood or whatever, and we constantly have to think about resetting, reprogramming. So this is, and when you do it with this sensitivity and this intellectual, also it's very vulnerable and very explicit, and it's very careful and precise. This is the way we should do it. This is the way we should poke a hole. So they offer a lot to me. Thank you, guys.
Well, I don't know whether we have much to learn from it. We have, of course, had in history the opening of the Zwin, which was created by a flood in the 12th century. And then the verdronken land of Safting was by St. Antoniusnacht or something, 17th century. So we do have them, but they're very, the intervals are huge. Anyway, so I don't know, the practical environment, I mean the material environment is quite different. So whether we can learn anything from the Japanese case, I don't know, except perhaps the resilience, and in a more generalized way, the way that the Japanese population responds to this kind of disasters. We may be facing other disasters. I don't think that we're very likely to meet similar disasters, but whatever disaster that comes on to us, I think we can learn something from the way they try to make the best of it, and they show resilience in the face of adversity. So it's a little bit a sweet sour conclusion I make, but I think that's the best I can give you at this point.
I would very much like to thank you all for being here. Thank you, Suzuka and Shin, for thinking about, making us think. Thank you, Professor van der Walle. Thank you, Rudy, for coming. And I should also thank very particularly on this occasion Katrien van der Malire, who's been the curator of this series of exhibitions, Young Makers, Thinkers, Dreamers, for the last 2 years. This is the last edition of this series. But we are thinking about making that into something more tangible and perhaps as permanent as any human endeavor can be, because somehow that is what we have to believe in. So we'll see more of this. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the evening. Thank you.